Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Group Therapy. I am Kirk Henderson, editor-in-chief of MavsMoneyball.com. God, my hair looks terrible. Hope everybody's having a nice little Friday. We're recording here. It's Friday, May 5th. It's a week before I turn 39. Trying to get my life in order. It's impossible to do at the same time. But as has been our role as of late, we're hanging out here on Fridays, talking a little Mavs, talking a little NBA at large, talking about maybe, the upcoming draft lottery, which we should all be petrified of. We can talk about any of the news of the recent week. We can talk about hypotheticals. I am very interested in hearing what you guys have to say this afternoon. Let me see here. I need to get some links set out. Jeff, thank you for tuning in. I'm glad. I understand you can't listen because of work. We'll go back to doing these at night, and we will, kind of bounce it around at some point. I'm just trying to take advantage of hanging out with my wife in the evenings a little bit after I did not do that for 82 nights during the basketball season. So let's kind of, go through sort of some of the things that have happened in at least the last week in Mavs land. So the ones that are really, that's standing out to me, at least news-wise, the one we sort of have to lead with is the fact that Luka Doncic has offered to pay for the funerals and counseling for the families of the 8 children that were killed during the school shooting in Belgrade. That was pretty horrible as all these things are, and there's really frankly, there's just no way to talk about it. It's at least not for me. It's not why I got into this. And it's just shows what kind of person he is that he offered to do something like this. It's really horrible that he has to do something like this. And beyond that, I'm not particularly interested in really going forth from there. Let's see here. We have a question in the chat from Christopher about the coaching opportunities that Mark Stein mentioned. So as we all know, Greg St. Jean moved on to another opportunity, which opens up a coaching vacancy within the Mavericks myriad of assistant coaches. I don't necessarily, it's interesting because Jared, let's see here, they have just so many. And it's interesting that they're seeming to be looking for more of a veteran presence. I've kind of asked around, and it seems that upon reflection, the coaching staff this past season was too inexperienced. They got a little ahead of their skis, and they didn't know how to cope. And I think we could see that in certain elements, which is interesting now that we hear that from Mark Stein, James Borrego, and Jeff Hornacek are the top targets for the Mavericks. Now, both of those guys are, former head coaches. And when Kidd was first in the league, particularly up in New Jersey and then in Milwaukee, he tended to have staffs that weren't super experienced. I'd be curious to know what the push for a more experienced assistant head coach would mean for the team? Like, what sort of things do those guys bring? Stein also name dropped Frank Vogel, former Mavs assistant Terry Stotts, and also Silas, which would be interesting, but doesn't seem like any of those three are all kind of lower down on the list. I really don't have a firm take on any of the assistant coaching, other than I would like to see some more offensive creativity, particularly on out of bounds plays and stuff like that. The Mavericks were, they're pretty good in 2021, 22, and then this last season they really weren't. All right, my man Andreas is calling in again from his side of the world. So how are we doing this evening on how's Europe?
Very good. Thank you very much. Still standing.
What's going on tonight?
I'm in a lovely hotel here, and last time I've been here, I remember you talking about Christian Wood. So what an asset he might be, and that he hasn't had any Greg Popovich kind of coach and so on and so forth. I think that was, and I think is still the merit. Looking at the achievements from Jason Kidd, I'm also not his biggest fan. There it goes. And you just now pointed out something which I find very interesting because it still is true. The lack of experience on the coaching staff or on the Dallas Mavericks bench is very obvious. There's no Dwayne Casey sort of championship run coach there. There isn't, right?
Right.
And so that the names you just mentioned are floating around at least is something which makes me feel good. It really does. About the whole team. And I must say, and yes, I'm saying that as well, about Christian Wood. Because if we do get a good coaching staff, I believe there is a chance that I would like to see a Christian Wood back on a minimum deal. Give him 1.8, give him the last spot on the roster, and give him some run when Davis Bertans doesn't hit his first three shots. So why the heck not? I know. I would give it a try. I heard this English saying, yeah, please.
His free agency is going to be worth watching because
very much so. Yeah,
he's so talented, and yet he's gone through 8 teams. So it's like, which of the other 21 really want him?
Exactly.
I don't know. Like the Charlotte Bobcats. I mean, Hornets, Bobcats. God, shows my age.
Yeah, same here. We have a similar age, so I know them under this name as well. So I always struggle to say in New Orleans Pelicans. So there you go. Is it an English saying? If a student didn't learn, the teacher didn't teach? I think it is. I picked it up somewhere. And I think I think it applies to some degree to Christian Wood, because at one point, I think you said it last time, between 16 and 22, there is the development going on. I think you said this, and I believe you hit the nail on the head there. Yet again, another wonderful English saying. And I think he has missed an opportunity there, right? And let's see what can be salvaged, if that's the right word. And that's it. His last the last spot is his in my mind. That being said, maybe to touch on 2 other points.
Sure.
I thought recently about, okay, we need a power forward, right? So we love Maxi to death. We all do, right? The second guy out of Würzburg who we really adore. I get that. But who's out there? There's a Jeremy Grant. I think we can forget about him. There's a Grant Williamson. I think he will resign with Boston because obviously. And I'm not entirely sure if we want to give Kristaps Porzingis a second go on the power forward or something like that. I think we've done that. Thank you very much. We have
he's eligible for an extension, and I think he's going to get one from Washington. He's been pretty good. He's been more consistent. Yeah,
exactly. I think he's found his spot. I think he seemed to. I think based on his post interviews, he's always appeared to be somewhat of a mature guy. Really, I think we got to hand it to him. But in terms of fit, I think New York wasn't it. Dallas obviously wasn't it. So I'm happy for the guy, So yeah. Leaving the the starting spot at the Dallas Mavericks open again, unless we want to, give Maxi yet another go at the 4 or whomever, right? We Justin Holiday, Markieff Morris.
Mhm.
It might be a little bit controversial, but why not putting Luka at the 4? I think he's gone through a lot of positions.
One could argue his natural position might be the 4 just because of his size. And it's
exactly.
like if you could play him with some other big guards and let him operate out of a different position now and again, well, let him ask him to.
Yeah.
That'd be I would love to see some Luka at 4. They occasionally did the rare Luka Doncic at 5 matchup, which was really fun.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, so that will be something. If by some sort of luck we continue to have Kyrie on the team, we have a 1. We can always get wings. But there are a lot of wings out there this off season. I think we can get some, and don't worry too much about the 4 spot. And 5, putting a Jakob Poeltl in or something like that to. And again, allowing Maxi to come off a bench, that will be a big thing in my mind. Again,
actually, he has to come off the bench. I think.
Yeah, he does. There's no way to this. Yeah, and then I really, and I mean, it's the Mavericks. Come on, we will probably see some of those bigs we currently have on the roster back again, right? So we Maxi for sure. I think that's a given. And I think Jawal will be in up until he is 42 or something.
JaVale comes with the building at this point. And
exactly. Has an inventory number.
There was a ESPN segment today where former Duke and Chicago point guard Jay Williams, he was the guy that was drafted right after Yao Ming, if I remember correctly, way back in the day. He's now a pundit on TV. And he was trash talking Anthony Davis, basically saying that like there are days where he looks like JaVale McGee, to which the marketing slogan for JaVale McGee is Anthony Davis light. That's the and I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah, I see. So then we have Davis Bertans.
Always and forever.
Always and forever. That's the second guy with the inventory number. Great piece on the website.
Did you like that one? Yeah, tell the writer Clint. He's one of our funniest guys, and he never writes stuff. He's like, well, I don't know a ton about basketball. And I'm like, do any of us just enjoy talking basketball?
Here you go. Good point. I really like that one. All the player reviews. I really like the story.
Right.
And so really, thinking about it, some of the guys will be back, obviously. But when I think about it, who could we sign? Who could we bring on the big position? Who will be back? Who could be stretched out? I'm not entirely sure if he will. And who would I really like to see back? That's the question.
I mean, I want everyone off the team.
Around my head.
I want everyone off the team but Luka. Like everyone. Send them all. But I don't really have a good answer because part of it is my brain hasn't led to free agency because it's May 5th. Free agency doesn't officially start until July 1st. The draft is in late June. So we'll probably start at Mavs Moneyball, our free agency stuff, like the first week of June. So for like another 4 weeks. So I don't know. There's just so much stuff that is up in the air, but what else do you got for us? Anything?
No, those were pretty much the takes, and thanks for that. Thanks for allowing me on.
Of course, you're always welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll talk soon. You have a good day. Technology is fantastic to where that man can be sitting on the street and calling in from his phone, and we can talk to him and have great audio, great connection. It's fantastic. Before I bring up my next guest, Brent, I want to remind everyone, do me a favor. First, go like the stream. That helps. The second thing I want you to do is go and subscribe to our stream. in our shows. We do these at least twice a week. When we're in season, I do them like as many times as, like, if there are 4 basketball games, we have a live show and a post game show. That's 8 shows. I will be, at some point bringing on some more draft centric folks to actually talk with them. But I'm at this point, I'm like trying to stick to a schedule, and the sheer number of "what about Frank" jokes that are in the chat right now is absolutely killing me. So yes, if you could subscribe, that would greatly appreciate it. I'm probably going to leave in an ad break right now because this show won't be as long as some of our others. I have to take my wife to the airport. But remember, if you guys are interested in helping Josh and I, because I'm probably never going to do anything that will charge for subscriptions. It's listening to the ads, it's liking the stream, it's telling your friends. That sort of stuff is very helpful to us. So we will be right back, if you're listening on the podcast, after a short break.
We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all in one place so easy and streamlined so I can spend more time on the rest of my business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Okay, coming up next is Mavs Moneyball contributor Brent Brooks. He figured out how to get this to work. Brent, what's up, man?
Here we are. Technology's wonderful.
It is wonderful. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. Good to see you.
You too. It's been a while.
It's been a minute. This whole Greg St. Jean not coming back thing has me thinking about the year before NFL head coaches are fired and the DC or the OC has to go to placate roiled up ownership. It's like, we're not happy, and yet we know we can't fire you. Something's got to change. Mm-hmm. They found their scapegoat, right? I don't know how much we can really pin on an inexperienced assistant coach when we have a glorified spectator pacing the sideline. I think it's an indictment on Kidd and may signify more than anything else that we've seen so far that maybe the hot seat really is a thing in year 3. What do you think?
Oh, it has to be. And one of the things that we didn't get to on the news front, because I just kind of started talking and I want to bring people up on stage and get to takes well before I discuss news, because you guys can get news wherever. But the Mavericks are playing 2 preseason games in Abu Dhabi, and they're also playing a game in Spain against Real Madrid. Historically, just looking back at teams that start seasons overseas, start the year slow. It's been, you go look at any team that travels overseas and they tend to start the year slow. I got into a discussion, some people would call it an argument, with Mavs radio broadcaster Chuck Cooperstein the other night. And he pointed out how Kidd likes to experiment to start the year. And which I was just like, being a dumbass is not an experiment, is the thought that I had. Because it's like, right. Again, starting JaVale McGee is objectively stupid. I'm sorry, it's stupid. He's 34. He sucks. We lost games to start the year because JaVale McGee sucks ass. There's no other way. Might have made the playoffs if we didn't throw away, 15, 12 games to start the year.
Well, okay. Look, he played harder in the last part of the year.
He really did.
When he was angling for a new contract, right? And I think that Kidd wanted to sign you've talked about this, the idea of JaVale McGee more than he wanted to actually sign the reality of Jamal.
Yes.
So
the idea of a 7'1" guy with a 7'6" wingspan that looked like he knows how to play basketball. He just doesn't.
The idea that kid likes to experiment is he will say we're trying to get, he said this both years, we're trying to get the answers to the test before we take the test, meaning we're going to use the regular season as a laboratory and then show what we've learned in the playoffs. And one of the things that I've said before and things I've written for you is, man, we can't win championships in the regular season, but you can lose a championship or you're shot at it in the regular season. And it shouldn't take you as long as it seems to arrive. Like Carlisle seemed to know instantly as a chef, whether he had great ingredients, average, or poor ingredients. He kind of knew what he was working with in the kitchen. If you've probably seen those videos on YouTube, TikTok, where they'll bring in this low dollar item to this guy in the kitchen and go, hey, can you make gourmet such and so with this? And man, Carlisle could do that. Kid seems to be the opposite. And you know how I feel. You know, we're probably going to have to endure another year, maybe longer, of this era. But I really got hope that maybe tinkering with the staff, and you wanted to know what that was a sign of or where that push came from. It, to me, is if everything's great, and obviously the record shows that it wasn't, then you don't make changes. You only make a change like that, and maybe there's more coming. And the reporting that it needs to be a veteran coach, that's not like, oh, we're going to go find our next young hotshot to be under Kid's wing. Mm-hmm. This is, we need to find a steadying force who has a experience and knowledge base that's deep enough to cover over the implication here being of the head coach, these deficiencies that showed up over and over. We've talked about out of timeout plays and last possession plays. You need more than 30-foot step backs from Luka. You need to involve the entire team. Too much of it was improvisational because that's the only offense they ran. Now, 90% of the time, that's a great offense, but the coaching shows up in those pivotal moments on the margins. And how much did Igor help in year one? How much was he missed in year two? And is that part of what they're looking to replace in year three?
Well, that was one of my favorite comments. I was going through, and Chuck, look, I like Chuck Cooperstein. He's fun to talk to. He engages. He doesn't take things personally. He's very good for an older guy at social media. I really appreciate it. One thing he said to someone was they threw out all of Igor Kokoskof's stuff after 20 games last year. I'm sorry. No one in their mind is going to convince me that a Eurobasket winning cup. Didn't they win Eurobasket in 2017? Slovenia? Was it Eurobasket? I get all these European tournaments confused, and I'm sure that pisses off our European listeners to high heaven. You're not going to convince me that a Eurobasket winning coach runs an offense that starts off the fucking 2021-22 season with Dorian Finney-Smith running 2 post-ups in the first quarter. I don't know if you remember that. I will never forget Dorian Finney-Smith post-ups. It's just, it's brain worms for me. It's Luka not using his paints, Brent. He's Picasso, but he's not using all the right paints. God, I'm so coaching is very important. We just saw this with Milwaukee Bucks and Bud, who got fired. Bud was not really good as a in-series, in-game coach, but right, as a top-down philosophical understanding of who his team was, fantastic. He is incredible. It's finding that right blend. And frankly, it's hard. Coaching is a lot harder than I think it is. It just has to be. But where we are is just in this weird spot where we're kind of always wondering what's going on with this and that. And, are we being nice enough to Luka? Does Luka have enough input? It's like, I've gotten the sense in the pushback from our Slovenian followers that Luka desperately will push back on coaching. He's a superstar. He wants to engage. He wants to be fought. It's like guys like this don't become who they are without significant pushes from the authority figures around them. He probably and the fact that they treat him with such, what if we make Luka mad? Well, if you make Luka mad, you might get fired. If you don't make Luka mad, you might get fired. How about we do the thing that gets the best out of Luka and the team and see where it goes? If you get fired after 2 years because it's a tough working environment, it's a competitive situation. Okay, that's life for me. The Dallas Mavericks, in all likelihood, and I'm off on one now because I'm hungry. I haven't eaten today.
Yeah.
The Dallas Mavericks are unlikely in the rest of the history of the franchise while you and I are alive to get a player as good as Luka Doncic ever again.
Yep.
We don't talk about that enough because people are it's like, oh, well, this has happened twice. They got Dirk and they got Luka. Sorry, that's winning the lottery twice. You don't win the lottery twice. So go ahead.
We saw enough bad Mavericks, pre-Dirk Mavericks basketball, especially in the 90s, to know what it's like to be in a year or a stretch of years where there is no hope. When you start talking about the extremes of micro coaching Luka, taking the offense out of his hands, constraining his greatness, creativity, et cetera, and the other extreme being, well, he's going to run the show. I push back, and not that you're saying this, but if someone were to say that those are the only two possibilities, I would push back on that notion and say, let's be embracing of the greatness and the improvisational style 80-90% of the time, but you've got to have scripted, coordinated, orchestrated offense that you can go to. One of the examples of this is Draymond Green at the 5. It really works. It is suffocating through the years, but there's a reason he isn't the starting center. You don't use your changeup as your fastball, and the Mavericks need offensively, as great as the overall numbers are, they need something that Luka can go to as a coordinated, orchestrated changeup off of what they run most of the time, especially in critical moments, out of timeouts, last possession. The team was too easily scouted, and that was one thing I wanted to say was the St. Jean thing. And while I still have you, the other thing I'm thinking about is, I know sometimes we get the narrative is we're too negative on Mavs Moneyball, but I think that what is getting under talked about is this 20% chance of ping pong ball hell. I don't know that we're like Isaac and Nick are making videos, and rightly so. It's great content. 3% chance to get Wemby. Come on, if we can sit around and fantasize about 3%, we have to spend. Isn't it fair? A proportional amount of time, and maybe you can step through me what the dark, dreaded timeline looks like. What does the offseason look like when you have egg on your face, humiliation, fine money, almost beat the Bulls anyway, and somehow wound up in this coveted spot after all the PR nightmare that followed it, and you still lose it. I mean, obviously, New York's going to go crazy and laugh their asses off, and rightly so. But how do the Mavericks navigate this offseason without that pick?
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked, because all I really do is think about dark things. No, I'm not. The reason I explained this to people who were really upset with the Mavericks tanking, and that includes both Mavs fans and national fans. And somebody said to me that was a national person. It's like, hey, well, if the Mavs lose the pick, what is that? That's just terrible. Well, what that really does, Brent, is it speeds up the car crash that we're involved in right now. Like what the Mavericks are in is they are involved in a slow motion car crash to losing a generational superstar because of a combination of bad luck and mismanagement. Just like the Cavaliers lost LeBron James, just like the New Orleans Pelicans lost Anthony Davis, though I waffle on Anthony Davis stuff. If this pick goes away, they are going to have to consider trading Luka soon. Probably not this year, but probably next summer if they lose the pick. Because they'll throw something together. The Mavericks have a historical knack for failing up. Like Luka Doncic, for example. They even fell in the lottery and then still ended up with Luka Doncic. So that's kind of my take, is that, when you don't have that asset and you really, the only way you can improve your team is by hoping, Adrian Wojnarowski talked a little bit about this yesterday. We're going to have to get Mavs CBA, our man Scott, on here at some point talking about this. He thinks that the second apron, I think as it was, might result in a lot of teams moving players around that otherwise they wouldn't retain. And he thinks there's going to be a lot of player movement just as teams look to not get the shit kicked out of them by like the super duper luxury tax and that sort of thing. That could be what the Mavericks are counting on and hoping for. But I think that there's a real chance that if they lose this pick, that pushes forward the disaster, like the disaster button to where the Mavericks have to reset. That's probably not a take that people like, but we're in a nosedive. And I keep thinking, like, there's a phrase that it's later than you think.
Objects are closer than they appear. Yeah.
And that's where we are, because we're all convinced, and this is what fandom is you can pull yourself up. Like, we have to hope against hope. Like, that's just the nature of this. Like, I talked myself into JaVale last summer. I did. It's on the record. So it's very, it's very difficult. All this is now the 20% stuff. The reason Nick, Isaac, me, the rest of us don't really talk about that is that doesn't sell papers. No. And I do think addressing it once or twice is worth it, but I've thought about writing this the past couple of weeks where I really, the hours later than you think is sort of what the theme of the article might be if I ever get around to it. Because you want to talk about it, but then you want to move on, because it's not like you don't follow a team hardcore to constantly be mad. That's one thing. Like, Jeff Skinwade and I disagree on a lot of things, but that's one of the things where he's right. Like, if you're pissed all the time when you're watching the Mavericks, then you need to go do something else. Like, that's not the point.
2 years ago, the Western Conference run, I guess we can officially call it 2 years ago now. It's a hell of a lot of fun to watch. And I felt like that was the apex version of that roster. And the underpinnings of its flaws that you and I were both, still obviously remain concerned about, just showed up in all kinds of ways. And I think that we've been fed such a Pollyannish view of what the next season's going to look like from Mavs Central, that the season that we just watched, the sum of all fears kind of season we just watched, is, I think, bringing a sense of realism to kind of where we are in the timeline, because there is optimism going into a new year, no matter what. And there will be 4 or 5 new faces, and new faces, if you backtrack their careers and talk to their previous fan bases, they'll be like, oh yeah, that guy. But when it's you getting this new player, I mean, goodness, we were excited about Justin Holiday for a few minutes. So it's going to be some excitement. But I just feel like we're at this time of year where there is a psychological disconnect between hot stove baseball / basketball style talk. It's like, ooh, the Mavericks can get such and so, and here's this hypothetical trade, and it's fun to do and fun to talk about. But the truth is, we don't need just new players. We need 2 to 3 top 6 level players. So my best case scenario, I kind of want them to hold on to the pick if they, can land it well. But that's a big question in and of itself. If you can get somebody to be a starter level player out of the box and use other quote unquote other resources and other methods to get another, maybe 4 out of 5 starters being plus or close to, where we were in terms of efficiency and whatnot 2 years ago, maybe there is some kind of hope for next year. But man, I keep thinking about ping pong ball hell and where this whole thing goes conversation wise. And I don't want it to happen. I'm not.
No, me either.
It's like
nobody does.
If we all get in our cars and we drive on the highway, and we know in the back of our minds that we may not know what the statistical chance is for something terrible happening, but we know it's there. And maybe that's why we don't, off the top of your head, know what the odds are on any particular drive. You know that, you're going to make it home, but you get in the car and go because you accept the risk reward of, well, I need to get to my destination.
Right.
If there was a 20% chance you were going to get into a terrible accident, you wouldn't get in the car. Yeah. This is you could go, well, then they're going to be able to trade the next year's pick, and they'll still have 2 picks to trade. I don't buy into that at all. I think that a pick in this year's draft, just at 10, is on the open market so much more valuable, especially on draft night, to a team that sees something bright and shiny that they want right the blank now. as opposed to, oh, you're going to trade me 2024 or 2026. It's just not as valuable. Outside of the thought that maybe the Mavericks suck so much that that pick's going to be more valuable down the road. But there's something to the immediacy of having this asset to either utilize or trade. Man, it's 80% chance to avoid the organizational guillotine, and I'm just hoping that we can get past that moment and not have that to talk about anymore, because it's kind of weirding me out a little bit.
I understand. I mean, this has been one of the more difficult eras of content making for me. And granted, Mavs Moneyball still has like stuff every day because we're like true sickos. But like my friend Dalton over at DallasBasketball.com, like they do like a pretty good job of like either recycling or taking interviews and like writing sort of pseudo stories around it. But it's like it's not really what I like to read all the time. So it's like I'm having us churn stuff out. And right now it's just like it feels bad. It feels weird where we're like writing about, we're writing about top 5 draft picks this next week. There's a number of people like we're going to get to Wembanyama. We're going to get to Asar Thompson. We're going to get to these we already did one on Brandon Miller because there is a small chance that the Mavericks bump up. Mm-hmm. And but it also feels like wish casting, which is one of my least favorite things in Mavs sports. Cause it's like, oh, well, this week could end up with Dwight Howard and Chris Paul. It's like, no, my heart's been broken too many times. I'm well past the hoping stage in my fandom. So it's, we're just going to keep churning stuff out and kind of see where we end up.
All right, man. Thanks for chatting.
Of course. That was Brent Brooks. He writes for Mavs Moneyball when he is able to. Trying to think, we had some questions in the chat. This is a fantastic one where it says, question to you, Kirk. If we lose the pick and Luka eventually gets traded from the Mavs and have to reset, how much of a break from the Mavs would you need to have? So I'm going to make sure Dirk Nowitzki walkabout. Yeah, if you Google the words Dirk Nowitzki walkabout, the second post down is from the Dallas Observer, and it's from an author named Jesse Hyde. Dirk went on a walkabout in Australia and then was honest enough to talk about it. Like one of the crazier things that's happened during my time as a fandom, because like I can't imagine like James Harden losing in the playoffs Giannis Antetokounmpo. They just lost in the first round. And basically going on a journey of reflection. It just wouldn't happen. Let's see if there are any others. Nobody else really wants to pop up on stage. See if there's anything else that we need to address here at the moment. Just kind of going through Mavs Moneyball stuff. I've enjoyed the playoffs. I don't like rooting for the Warriors, but that's kind of where I am. The Anthony Davis of it all was really interesting. Like he was so good in game 1 and so blech in game 2. And it's remarkable. Like that's why I think this Luka stuff should be so frustrating for everyone. And when I say Luka stuff, I mean everything else related to the Mavericks around Luka, because if you get to the playoffs with Luka, all bets are on. Okay. You should be fully invested in the Mavericks doing something wild because Luka's that kind of guy. This is a hilarious comment. Leo asking if I have any inside scraps. Of course I don't. I don't talk to anybody. I almost go out of my way not to know things. I see Tom waiting to chat in the stream, so we're going to invite Tom up. Tom, welcome. What's going on?
Hey, Kirk, can you hear me?
I can. You sound good.
Okay, nice. I managed to set up my mic, not my cam yet.
That's fine. This is good.
I would like to thank you for the time. It's perfect for you,
Well, it's better than the ones that I do at 11 o'clock, Texas time, which is God knows whatever time for anyone to the east of us. So I'm happy to do these in times where we can get people who aren't normally able to join.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you your opinion about more like a strategic overview, because in my opinion, the main problem of the Dallas is that they are not attracting any defensive players. Like, if you look at usually the winning team or the teams that are in the finals have like 2 or 1 good offensive player, but like really good 3 or maybe even 4 defensive guys. And basically we have like Dorian Finney-Smith was our best defensive player and he was undrafted. Like when was the last player in all NBA defensive team that played in Dallas? I think Tyson Chandler, right? So, I mean, if the management doesn't understand that to play defense, like Kid is always, let's play defense, but with whom? Like, and if they don't understand this and they are just signing Kyrie who will not play defense, and they are like, before I watched on Twitch the Mavs official podcast, and they were like explaining how to finish the season under the cap. And of course, like, you know, Golden State's, Boston, Bucks, they overspent like crazy. And with if we will be at the cap and we will not get enough money to buy the defensive players we need to put them near Luka to basically have the defense that we need. Because if I'm not mistaken, we have the best half-court offense already. Even before Kyrie, we had it. So, like, offense is not the problem. Like, the main problem is the defense.
That's right.
And I like, the Mavs official podcast was saying, "Oh, let's give Powell $5 million." I mean, he doesn't rebound, he doesn't defend. Like, it's a disaster. I think I realized this year that I think that this team is not strategically smart enough to even know what kind of players to get. And that's why I think like we are done, basically. Like, it's impossible. Because if the team is not intelligent enough to understand what kind of players they need to get, it's over. I don't know. I want to hear your take about this. Am I just too much depressed because we Slovenians are usually very pessimistic, or how do you see it?
Pessimistic is the right word. And I'll answer your question like this. To me, it's not necessarily the defense is part of the problem. It's that the Mavericks have too many what we refer to here as one-dimensional players. They're guys who are good at one thing on either side of the ball, whether it's Reggie Bullock being able to hit threes, but he cannot dribble or make a layup to save his life. You have a center like Dwight Powell who's able to roll to the basket, but he is essentially a saloon door or a hostess at a restaurant ushering people to the basket. That's sort of where he falls for me, and where the Mavericks have been for years, where they have all these guys that just aren't multi-dimensional enough to make a big difference. And that's been really the challenge that we face watching the team, because from the outside looking in, I know this. Like, we shouldn't have to crow and be upset that the Mavericks don't have good dribblers, because dribbling is a basic skill of a basketball player. And where, you know, there was the 77 Minutes in Heaven podcast, the horrendously named podcast with my friend Tim Cato and Mike Paolucci. They had a take. Mike Paolucci had a take a couple of weeks ago that he feels that in terms of Maverick team building philosophy, the Mavericks are always 2 to 3 years behind. The word here, I think, is meta, basically the industry standard, for lack of a better term, of what a successful team is. The Mavericks are never on the cutting edge. And that has been such a problem with the team building for years, because I'm sure you've heard on other podcasts the phrase "the bird rights trap," which is essentially when you keep your own players and you re-sign them to more expensive contracts, you're locking yourself in as a team to these guys that just aren't good enough for the money that they're being paid. And the Mavericks have walked into that with Hardaway, with, Dorian to an extent. And then by trying to avoid the bird rights trap with Jalen Brunson, they let a key piece of their team go. The team building element is very hard, because going and finding free agents, we often make it seem like it's easy. It's really not, because there's a lot of limitations salary-wise and location-wise, and then there's Mark Cuban and play style and what players want. It's all very difficult. I'm sure you see this with the different basketball and football clubs of Europe, where it's like some teams just are more destination-based. It's a frustrating situation we find ourselves in.
Okay, just one more question for you. If we can see this from the outside, how come they can't see it? Like, this is what I don't understand. Even like you have so much information from the inside more. How come you don't see the wood from the trees, or how do you say, the forest from the trees?
This is a fantastic question, Tom. And it has to do with the fact that the Dallas Mavericks owner, Mark Cuban, is very convinced of his own correctness. And when you get a player like Luka Doncic, which, as you know, as Europeans know, as Slovenians know, when you get a player like that, which is the hard part of any team building, there's kind of a attempt to breathe a sigh of relief. Okay, we did the hard part. But the margin for error shrinks and continues to shrink as the team building process goes along, because the superstar gets more and more impatient with not winning. I mean, I remember Luka's rookie year. I had, Slovenian fans telling me, like, Luka's going to ask out. He doesn't want to be a part of a losing team. And it's like, well, the team was bad. That's why we were able to get Luka. It's a different team structure in the United States with the draft and such. But Mark Cuban and the Mavericks are very convinced of their own path. The hiring of Jason Kidd is the easiest thing for me, because they convinced themselves that a coach that did not have a job was the next coach of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, maybe he's still going to work out. I don't think so. But they refuse to say, okay, this guy's part of the problem. Instead, they're doubling down. And that's just what happens, because admitting mistakes is not something this team has ever been very good at.
So basically, toxic masculinity is the problem.
I wouldn't call it that, but it is like, it's just such self-assured confidence. I mean, I don't know. If I ever became, and Mark asked me this when he came on my show a couple years ago, where he said, wouldn't you do what I'm doing if you were in charge? And the answer is yes, of course I would, but I'm a moron. Like, I'm not a billionaire. I'm a guy with an internet connection. Like, what do we do?
but even so, like, after like 11 years of not being able to produce results by myself, shouldn't I think, maybe it's time to ask somebody else. Maybe I'm too old for this right? And somebody else should take over.
We'll see. Hopefully we don't find out too late.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully. I will try to be optimistic.
I will too.
It's more fun that way, but like when we lost Brunson for nothing, my heart just sank. I said, this is a nightmare. Like, that draft was like amazing. Luka and Brunson, and like they were set for the guards. They just could have gone for the wings and the center, and it would be, I don't know. I think that was such a major misplay, not giving Brunson 120 or whatever he wanted.
Whatever he wanted.
Like, yeah, I mean, he's better than Kyrie, in my opinion, to play next to Luka, because Brunson can actually play slow while Kyrie really prefers to play fast. And I don't know, this is maybe another thing you could talk about. How do you see it? Because like I don't see Kyrie and Luka matching perfectly. Like, Luka likes to take it slow, likes to take 10 seconds to get over the half. And like Kyrie wants to run, wants to, create fast. And like that doesn't go well together, in my opinion. But Brunson could like play slow next to Luka.
I understand why people aren't necessarily a fan of how it turned out, but if they had won 4 more games and made the playoffs, I sort of think everybody would be feeling differently about the offense. That's just kind of my take on it, because when they work together, the Philadelphia 76ers game is the game that really sticks out in my mind. I don't know if you remember that game, but that was the game where both Luka and Kyrie scored 40 points each. That's not going to happen every game. But they were so good, and that it's hard for me to get that out of my mind, if that makes sense.
What was that? The game Embiid didn't play, or
he played? He played. It was like 130 to 127. They ran Embiid off the court because Embiid couldn't guard them.
I'm too old when you say 130. Like, what the hell is that? Like, where was the defense? Like, I remember like Jordan and Bulls like keeping people under 80. Like, okay, I know this is impossible into the NBA, but like at least under 110, please. Like, I think we lost almost every game that the opponent made more than 110 points.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, that's my like PTSD. Although talking,
I love
to
it.
But yeah, okay. Thank you for your answer.
Of course. Thanks for joining. I hope you come back.
Gladly.
All right, have a good day. All right, we got one more caller in the chat's waiting to hang out. Keen, I'm going to bring you up here. Let me figure out my buttons because I can't remember how to do some of this sometimes. Keen, welcome. What's going on?
What up, Kirk? Can you hear me?
I can. What's on your mind today?
Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about a tug of war that I feel like we keep talking about is, mortgaging the future by trading picks versus building through the draft. And I think you've talked about that several times, that I think you would prefer to build through the draft. But then we have this whole thing of a timeline that Luka has. So that means we keep mortgaging the future. We mortgage it with the KP draft, the trade. We mortgaged it with the Kyrie trade, giving up first round picks. I think Christian Wood, to an extent, giving up that first round pick, that was to an extent mortgaging the future also. And then I was listening to 77 Minutes this morning, and they were talking a little bit about if we get the fourth pick, we could trade it, or we keep the 10th pick, then we should trade it. And I feel like all of these moves are really just mortgaging the future to, keep Luka happy. And at what point, like, does he just leave and then we start to actually build through the draft? Because, me personally, I would love to use that 10th pick or use that fourth pick on someone who's going to be a good, solid player, or, even a superstar for years to come, as opposed to mortgaging it to get a distressed asset to play along, Luka and maybe Kyrie.
Well, it's a good question, and it kind of centers back to where I've been going, probably like 15 games left in the season, and I don't want to be like uber dark and like make people feel, unhappy and dread their fandom. But when you have so many bites at the apple every offseason, and you go back, and Josh Bowe and I have talked about this for a long time. The 2019 offseason was a preparation for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and the Mavericks failed. They failed to build a decent team. They failed to recognize what they had on their hands in Luka Doncic. And from there, it's been kind of playing catch up, where you have to undo the Kristaps Porzingis signing, which worked until it didn't. And Porzingis is just not the right fit. That's okay. All these things, mistakes simply add up. And so when you talk about mortgaging the future, in an attempt to undo a mistake sometimes, and we all do this in our personal lives, sometimes you make another mistake. And I think that's an element of what the Mavericks have done. The 2020 draft was a real toss-up. I get mad about some of the picks related to Josh Green and so forth. But if you go look at that draft, like James Wiseman went number one, number two. I mean, he was a disaster. And he was a disaster because it was a COVID draft where no one knew anything about these guys. So it's, sometimes I complain and talk about how easy it looks in hindsight, but it wasn't easy. It's mistakes were made. And when you make mistakes, you just have to, at a certain point, you have to stop making them, and you have to take the harder path. And I think that selecting somebody at 10 is the harder path. Luka's not necessarily going to like it. I don't know. It depends on who they could get at 10. But if you get somebody that's functional, you build, because you have Green, you have Hardy, you have Luka, you might have Kyrie. Go from there. See what happens. Like, let's not always it's the inclination to want to make everything perfect right now. If we're being honest with ourselves, the Mavericks played ahead of their skis in 2021 and 21-22. They won more games than they should have. And then last year they lost more games than they should have. So it's sort of starting over and figuring out how to make it work. That's what I hope they do, at least.
So you're leaning towards keeping the 10th pick.
I desperately want to keep the pick.
Okay.
Desperately.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. And then, obviously there's the pitfall of that 10th pick. You spend 3 years developing him, and he doesn't turn out to be anything. And then everyone's like, oh, we should have traded him for, I don't know, Chris Middleton or something like that. And
something, yeah.
And there's always a butterfly effect with everything. But I think I would just love to have that 10th pick be someone young and have the the potential to become someone better in hopefully 3 years. And I think
Right.
that's where I'm staying too. So my second question is about, you kept saying, this is a take the medicine year to, get off the KP trade. But with the Kyrie trade, this is not really taking the medicine. We're still, locked into the Stepien rule. And I don't know when we're taking this medicine, because it's definitely not this year, because we're still going to owe the next year's pick or the one after that. So I don't, I would love to take our medicine. And I thought losing and not making the playoffs was taking the medicine. But in hindsight, it really is. We still are on the hook with the Knicks.
It's a great point, and it's why I wasn't really a big fan of the Kyrie trade. I wasn't a fan leading up to it, but then it's like once something like that happens, as a person that comments on the team, there's only so much of an appetite to go, well, I told you so, and I do that a lot already, but I have to kind of couch it. And once Kyrie's on the team, it was like, okay, this is what we have. This is the bed we made. This is what we're going to have to do. And it's what's so frustrating is that you could argue that it was a double down that just didn't work. I mean, they didn't make the playoffs, so yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, for sure. It just feels like we keep paying off credit. We're opening credit cards to pay off the last credit card, and it's I don't know, but fingers crossed. Thanks for having me up, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for hanging out, my man. We'll hope to have you back. All right. I didn't mean to remove him. Maybe he removed himself. All right, guys. This was fun. It's always fun. Talking to you guys for over an hour is great. We'll be back next week, probably with a few more player reviews, any more news. We still have some time leading up until the lottery. I will probably be doing a live show the night of the lottery, so we can suffer together in real time as they undo the envelopes. I don't even know if I can be in front of a television. Thanks so much for hanging out. Again, please like the stream. Please leave comments. Please go and subscribe to the page. We're inching closer to 1,000. We got so many in the first few weeks, and then we just died. Well, that's because the Mavericks died. So now it's really only the hardcore fans here. You guys are wonderful. I hope everyone enjoys their weekend, and we will talk with everybody soon. Go Mavs.